I'd like to show you how to stretch watercolour paper. Now you're probably wondering what is stretching of watercolour paper and why do we do it? Well, stretching of watercolour paper means you're getting your paper and you're just very carefully taking it apart, well not taking it apart, but it just sort of separates slightly because it's wet. Then you're putting it on a board and taping it down so that when it dries it shrinks again and it stays nice and tight. So if you've ever dropped a bit of water on paper, you'll know that it gets a little bit buckled, and when it dries, it stays that buckled kind of effect. So what you want to do is, when you want to do a painting, you want it to stay nice and flat, so it looks nicer and it's more presentable. So I'm going to show you my way of doing it. If you have a look on the internet, you'll probably see numerous ways. This is the way that's worked for me. I'm just using a watercolour pad today. I'm going to tear out one sheet. This is an A3 size and it's 300 GSM paper. So it's thick, but it's not like cardboard, but it's not as thin as the usual paper that you have, say in your printer. In this little plastic bag here is what is called gummed tape. Now gummed tape is used for stretching of paper. This is a brand new sheet, so it's a little bit stuck on the end. So I keep this tape in a plastic bag. The reason being, if you get any water dropped on here, it'll just all glue together and that's the end of that. You might as well throw it in the bin. So when I prepare to stretch my paper, I tear off enough strips for each side. So that's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then this goes straight back in its plastic bag and I'll pop it away from the sink. I've got some paper towel here. I was using old tea towels and that sort of thing before, but I found paper towel to be a little bit more effective, and that's what I'm going to use as part of the stretching process. Okay, so I'm going to run this tap. I'm wetting both sides, making sure that I've covered the whole surface. And I'll just let the water run off so it's not too dripping wet. I'm going to lay it flat on my board, and just with a bit of paper towel now I'm going to push off that excess water. Alright. So I'm going to leave that. I need to leave that to sit for about 2 minutes. As it dries, or while it's sitting, it's actually going to buckle a little bit, which is fine. That's just telling me that the paper is stretching, which is what we're doing. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that for 2 minutes and then come back to you. Rightio, so you can see that 2 minutes has passed and it's buckled. So you can see that it's got a bit of a ridge there. That's fine, it's exactly what I expected it to do. So now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to run it under the tap, covering both sides again with water. And let that excess water drip off. I'm just going to use some paper towel again to push off that excess water a second time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the shiny side of this tape. So you'll see one side is kind of a matted look, the other side is shiny. That shiny side, once it gets wet, turns into like glue, so it's sticky. But I'll still wet both sides. And then one strip at a time, I'm going to put half of the strip on the paper and half on the board. And you can probably see the edge there, half and half approximately. You really need to have it about half and half, because if you only put a little bit on your paper and the rest on the board, you'll find that sometimes air will get in underneath. Hold the end so that it doesn't move too much, and just take off that excess water underneath the strips of gummed tape. And that's about it. Now we just need it to sit flat and dry. And as it dries, it still does buckle a little bit, but if you've sealed it down properly, by the time it's finished drying, it'll sit nice and flat. I just want to quickly talk about the board that I'm using. This is a piece of MDF, and I just cut it down to just larger than the usual size that I'll paint on, which is perfect for stretching paper. You can use plywood as well, but nothing that's shiny. You know, you get these bits of board or wood that are shiny. You don't want to use that because often the gum tape won't stick. This is a piece of paper I've stretched, and as you can see, it's sitting nice and flat. What I do next is I get some masking tape, and I put, this is probably about an inch wide, I put half on the white paper and half on the gummed tape. And I'll explain why. It's nothing to do with protecting your paper or anything like that. It's going to give me a little border when I'm painting. So this one here, it's not half and half. It's more like just a centimetre, I suppose, on the watercolour paper. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So just a little bit and the rest can go on the gum tape. So what happens is, once you've done your painting, and this one is almost finished, you know when you're painting and you're running your brush across the board, it goes, you know, it gets all messy on the sides. If you've got masking tape, like I've put here, what you can do is, once you've finished your painting, you peel this back and you have a little white border. And you have to be careful too that you haven't, you know, peel away from your painting, because the last thing you need to do is peel it into the painting and take off half of your painting. So that leaves me with kind of a white border. As you can see, the paint did bleed a little bit on the edge, but even so, you get the idea. The last thing I want to show you is how to take the paper off the board. So you're probably thinking, my goodness, it's glued onto the board. Well, yes it is. And this is the whole idea of having gummed tape and gluing your paper to the board. But you want to get it off. People have asked me, can I soak it off with water? Well, you could, but it might get a little bit tricky if you get your painting wet and you've ruined your painting. To get your paper off the board, you'll need a craft knife or a Stanley trimmer or a little knife like this. Be really careful, obviously, if it's a very sharp knife, and you probably should be using a steel ruler, but I've done this quite a bit that I'm just going to use, just cut it straight down. So what you need to look for is, see that underneath the gummed tape, you can see the edge of the paper under there. It's about there, and it's about there, and about there, and so on. You need to run your knife all around those edges, so I'm going to do that now, trying to be very careful. Okay, so I've gone around all the edges. Now I need to just pop that little sharp edge underneath, and I'll just take the knife all the way around, and that lifts the painting off the board. There. So that's it off the board, and then because I've got the nice white border, I just get some scissors and cut off my tape all the way around. Okay, so that just shows you that it's stretched, it stayed nice and flat. I've got a nice border to present it in my portfolio as well. So that's how I stretch paper. Hope it works for you.